So jumping back to critical analysis, okay? I know we might be thinking, hold on, Chloe, why are we talking about this now? We're talking about personal voice. Why did I just randomly chuck personal voice in there? Well, with purpose, of course. Because critical analysis comes from personal voice, as you can see, okay? You need to have your own ideas, and then you need to analyze them. You can't be critical if you don't have your own ideas. You can't be confident confident unless you're critical, because there's nothing to be confident about if you're just kind of explaining ideas. So what is not critical analysis? Let's cover critical analysis by first defining what it is not. So firstly, critical analysis is not just using quotes to describe the general events of the plot. This is something I see a lot of when I'm marking student responses, particularly in year 11. I don't want you guys to just, describe the events of the plot. So something like, this is what is really common in a lot of essays, something like this. It was somehow slightly frightening, like the gambling of tiger cubs, which will soon grow up into man-eaters. Here, Winston uses a simile to show how the parsons are afraid of their own children, turning them into the ministry of love. There is no analysis there. There you're literally just telling me what's happening in that quote. I don't want that, okay? I don't want plot retell. Or if you paraphrase what's in the quote. So here, if you use quotes to describe the events of the plot, this is you just using a quote to literally describe what's happening in the scene. I don't want that. You have to assume that your marker has read your text or watched your text. Paraphrasing the quote is a bit similar, but instead of you telling me what's going on in the scene, it's where students retell what just happened in that quote. So for example, she had the oddest sense of being herself, invisible, unseen, unknown. This being Mrs. Dalloway, not even Clarissa anymore. This being Mrs. Richard Dalloway. Clarissa feels that as she has aged, that she has become invincible. Youth is behind her, and now she is only known as the wife to Richard Dalloway and not as Clarissa. You've literally just retold me what's in that quote, okay? These are things we do not want. We do not want. There is no analysis there. You haven't drawn out the techniques, told me about the effect of the technique on me or the audience. Haven't done any of that. You've literally just described the events of the plot or just paraphrased the plot, okay? I don't mean you directly, just this student, this imaginary student who wrote these analysis, which are not genuinely analysis. Okay, what else is not critical analysis? So we spoke about using quotes to describe events of the plot, or paraphrasing the quotes. Other things are pointing out techniques but not actually talking about how they develop the meaning of the text. So we'll talk about this a lot in a second, but something that I see so much of is students saying, through the use of a metaphor, and then they'll insert the quote, and then say the overall idea that's captured in the quote. So through the use of a metaphor, the composer shows us this and this about grief, for example. We do not want that. We do not want that. If you're telling me that like the composer has used a metaphor, okay, talk to me about what is actually being metaphorically referenced. What is being compared to what? What does that actually say about the character or the setting or the plot? You can't just say through the use of this technique, this is being done. Through the use of this technique, the composer is comparing this to this, which portrays these certain characteristics about the protagonist, for example. Okay, but we'll talk about that more in a second if that's not making complete sense right now. Other things which is not critical analysis, asserting why the quote makes an important thematic point without including techniques. Hopefully we know that we need to include techniques all throughout our analysis, but still shockingly, unfortunately, I still see people use evidence without techniques, which is crazy. We need techniques when we're analyzing. Okay, so these are our components of analysis. Now, I'm really hesitant to give you like a specific structure in analyzing, as in, firstly, conceptual argument, secondly, quote, 3, technique. Why? Because HSC markers every year in their feedback, they're always saying that students' writing feels too blocky. And this is important And yeah, it's important to be aware of this right now because, again, it's one of those skills you can use year 11 to develop. So what am I actually referring to when I say blocky? A lot of us use peel, teal, steal, star, a lot of those kind of paragraph structure type thingies. And your markers know what those are. So your markers can tell when it's point, explain, evidence, link, okay? It's very blocky is what they're kind of meaning when they say that, right? It's like distinct, like, okay, the student now knows their point's over, time to go into your evidence or your elaboration. They don't want that. What they want instead is kind of, yeah, those kind of things that are covered, but it's very cohesive and everything flows into each other. And so that's why I'm a bit hesitant to say that this is kind of like, you know, a rigid structure that you must follow. Really, it's things that need to be covered in your analysis. So when you're introducing a quote, these are the things that you need to cover. Does not mean necessarily that you follow it like a structure, more like a guideline or framework, okay? So, I don't know if I went over it, but just to go through these things that we need to include, you need to have your conceptual argument, your quote, your technique, the effect of the technique, and the effect on the audience. Those are two different things, and we'll look at that in a second. And how does this develop or affirm or complicate or rebut your conceptual argument, which is your linking sentence. Okay, for extra spice, you need your context and audience impact. Now, these are the things that I was talking about when I mentioned what actually helps you have critical analysis. Talking about why your composer was inspired to say the things that they did and what audience effect that has. So, good analysis should reflect your own opinion on the meanings of the text using quotes and techniques to flesh out the details of your interpretation. Yes, okay? This is what I was talking about with your own personal voice. You need to have your own opinion and you need to support it with quotes and evidence.